Hello again, my little conscripts, and welcome to another Mordian Glory video. In today's episode, we shall be casting our ever-critical eye over another 10th edition Codex Imperial Guard datasheet. And this time, we are going to be looking at one of the units that has truly fallen the furthest from grace. A unit that was once considered an auto-include in every single list, and now is basically shelf tier. The prodigies of the Scholar Progenium, the Tempestus Scions. And in this episode, not only am I going to be reviewing the Tempestus Scions datasheet, but we're also going to be touching upon what has caused them to struggle so much recently, and how this is all a great example of a bigger problem that's happening in 40k at the moment. And so without further ado, let's dive right into this. As is tradition, let's start off with a look at the datasheet, beginning with the stat line. Veterans of the Guard will recognize this as a fairly typical Guard Elite Infantry profile. By that, we've got a 4+ save rather than 5+ save, and we've got Objective Control 1 instead of Objective Control 2. But just in case you are new here, I will go through what all of these stats mean and kind of how they fit into the broader tactical picture. A 6-inch move is very typical for most Guard infantry units. We're not Eldar who can run around at 7 inches, but we're not Squats or Necrons who shamble along at 5 inches. 6 inches is very much considered the baseline for movement in 40k. If you're much faster than this, you're considered quite a fast faction. If you're a bit slower than this, you're considered a relatively slow, maybe more methodical faction. It is important to understand, though, that the 6-inch movement for Scions is a little bit misleading, because Guard have access to things like orders, so we can just essentially for free put this up to a 9-inch move, which makes us relatively fast. And although it's not on this datasheet, and don't worry, we'll be getting into that in a moment, Scions do have the deep strike ability. They do. You might not see it in your codex, but trust me, they do have it, and that means that they can teleport down onto the battlefield instead of deploying normally and walking up the field or going in a transport or anything like that. So Scions and Guard infantry in general tends to be a lot faster than people really appreciate. However, whilst we might be slightly more speedy than people expect, we die like this. We're very, very fragile. Not our tanks, they're great, but our infantry is abysmally fragile. Toughness 3, in this power creeping world that we live in, toughness 3 might as well be toughness 0. You're going to be wounded on... if you're getting wounded on 3s, that's a good day. Most time you're going to be getting wounded on 2s, and if you get to have a 4+ save, then my god, it's Christmas come early in that regard. One wound means that even if you had access to a feel no pain, which we don't anymore, you're going to get picked up in droves because you don't have the wound density to really absorb all of the flat damage 2 and flat damage 3 weaponry out there. So your defensive profile is dog water. Leadership 7. Now, this is normally a very important stat for Guard, especially for Guard infantry, because you're thinking in terms of controlling objectives, and objectives need you to be able to pass battle shock tests so that you can keep OC, so that you can earn primary points. But Scions, and we'll touch on this when we talk about tactics for them, they're not a typical Guard infantryman ploughing onto an objective. They're deep striking down, they're smashing the entire area, they're killing anything with more than 2 legs. And so leadership for Scions is relatively less important, because what you tend to find is they drop down, they kill everything that they want to kill, and then they die. There's not enough of them, and they're not durable enough to be able to take any clapback. So Leadership 7 here is almost an irrelevant stat, and Objective Control of 1, likewise, you're not really going after objectives with them. So that covers the stat line, and we've touched upon a few things about what you can expect your Scions to do, but now let's get into the detail of that. Let's look at the unit composition and their weapons and war gear, because this is really the most important bit when it comes to Scions. Number 1, Scions come in variable squad sizes. Unlike Kazakin and Tempestus Aquilans, who have to be taken in 10-man squads, no ifs, ands or buts, Scions can be taken in either a 5-man squad or a 10-man squad. Now, before we even talk about what weapons you're going to give these guys, understanding these squad sizes is very, very important, because depending on whether you go for a 5-man squad or you go for a 10-man squad, it will completely and utterly change how you are meant to use this unit on the battlefield. In essence, big squads can take more special weapons. You'll get more plasma, you'll get more melter, you'll just get more DACA. So big squads tend to be good for receiving orders. That's where you want to be attaching your Scion command squads to. So you go for a 10-man squad, and then you can add a Scion command squad onto making a 15-man squad. The big squads bring a load of special weapons, the command squads bring a load of special weapons, and you just drop it in and you just smash, 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 smash. That's the damage dealing loadout, okay? Big 10-man squads really should be being led by command squads. You go all in on that, and in for a penny, in for a pound, and you just smash the area. 5-man squads are the total opposite. 5-man squads, you don't give them any leaders, you don't pay for any upgrades that are possibly available out there, nothing like that. You just take your 5-man squad with whichever free war gear it gets, and their job is to do no damage. Their job is to do secondary objectives. Now, I know before I said OC isn't very important, you know, you don't really care about the sound of objectives. Let me be clear about something. I was talking about primary objectives, standing on those circles, earning that primary points. Scions may not have much interest in primary objectives, but my god, those 5-man squads have a very, very big interest in secondary objectives. When you're drawing your cards, things like behind enemy lines, things like establish a locus, anything, engage north fronts, anything that requires you to get across the board and start doing actions or anything like that. That's where small 5-man squads of Scions, in theory, and we'll get to the in theory later on, that's where in theory they shine. Because for a relatively low cost investment, you're not spending the points on like a big 10-man squad with a command squad or anything. For a relatively low cost investment, you're able to achieve those objectives. And if you've got a squad of Scions in your army and they've been put into deep strike reserve, when you draw that card turn 2 or turn 3, you can be like, well, I can do this now for a small points cost, rather than having to try and either get some of my guys that have started on the board over there, which might be kind of tricky, and pull them out of a position where you really want them, or deep striking down a big squad or bringing in from reserve a big squad. That then it's a lot more points to essentially achieve the same victory points. So small squads do secondary objectives, big squads go as big as you can, go as powerful as you can. That's the unit that wants to be doing damage. So speaking of damage, let's get into the Wargear options. So for every 5 models in this unit, up to 2 Tempest Assassins can each have their hotshot las gun replaced with one of the following: a flamer, a grenade launcher, a volley gun, a melter gun, or a plasma gun. There is a little asterisk here, which means that you can't have the same weapon from this list more than once per unit, unless this unit contains 10 models, in which case you can't select the same weapon more than twice per unit. If you're not sure what that means, basically, in a 5-man squad, you can take 2 special weapons, but they can't be the same. So you couldn't take a 5-man squad with 2 plasma guns. You could take a 5-man squad with a plasma gun and a melter gun. In a 10-man squad, you can take 4 special weapons, but you can't take 4 of the same. You can duplicate each weapon once. So you could take 4 different special weapons, let's say grenade launcher, volley gun, melter gun, plasma gun, or you could take something like 2 melter guns and 2 plasma guns, or you could go 1 grenade launcher, 1 hotshot volley gun, and 2 melter guns. The point is you can only take duplicates twice. There's all these different weapon combinations and all these different ways of trying to think about how you sound. Let me just give you the right loadout. Okay, let me just give it to you. You always want to be taking as much plasma and melter as you can. No, you don't want flamers. No grenade launchers. Oh, but they get more shots. They got longer range melter guns. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Trust me. And I am flexing a little bit here, but it's just to try and get the point across. I'm not bragging, okay? I'm not trying to be a knobhead. As someone who's played this game competitively for 10 years, there has never, ever been an instance when taking not plasma and melter on your Scions has been a better choice than taking plasma and melter on your Scions. Okay, so if you're taking a 5-man squad and you've got access to 2 different special weapons, one should be a plasma gun, one should be a melter gun. If you're taking a 10-man squad, then you should be putting 2 plasma guns in there and 2 melter guns in there. Okay, any other option that you come with, whether it's but what are hotshot volley guns? Trust me, I've tried it. I've tried it many times. Any other option over plasma melter gun outside of very, very, very niche scenarios, you are essentially downgrading yourself. Now, obviously, this could change in the future, and if Scion loadouts become radically different in some mad 11th edition world, then I'll obviously be covering Scions in 11th edition. But right now, in 10th edition, Plasma Melter. Now that I've gone on that big rant and ramble, let's wrap up the other options we've got here. One Tempestus Scions Hotshot Lasgun can be replaced with one Hotshot Las Pistol and a Voxcaster. Honestly, you can leave this one at home. Yes, it is free, but you had to give up a hotshot rifle, which if you give the squad first rank fire, second rank fire, which you might want to because Scions all have a basic ballistic skill of 3+. So any 4s you see here, just ignore they are 3s. Again, FAQ. Scions have a basic ballistic skill of 3+. So there is an argument to be made out there that you don't need to give them +1 to hit. You want to have more shots. So you often will find people going first rank fire, second rank fire, which means that their plasma guns get extra shots, which is good, and then their hot shot rifles get extra shots as well. So you go up to 3 shots per guy. If you take the hot shot las pistol, it's not a big thing, but you are missing out on 2 shots a squad because this can't benefit from any kind of bonus shots. And the Voxcaster, it's dealer's choice. If you want to take the Voxcaster and the hot shot las pistol, fine. Personally, I find myself leaving it at home and not bothering with it. But that one is player preference. As for the Sergeant, the Tempesta, always go for Power Fist, always go for Plasma Pistol. This has not always been true. If I was doing this video in 8th and 9th edition, I would tell you to go for the Plasma Pistol and like a chainsword or something. But in 10th edition, when Wargear is free, there's no reason not to go for the Power Fist. There's no reason not to go for the Plasma Pistol. So if you're watching this video and it's 10th edition, always go Power Fist and Plasma Pistol. If you somehow find this video in 11th edition and you've not seen the one that will inevitably be redone at that point, the weapon options may be different. But for now, Power Fist and Plasma Pistol is the way you want to be going. So in summary, if you're taking a 5-man squad of Scions, you want to have the Sergeant with Plasma Pistol and Power Fist. You want to have 2 guys with rifles, and you want to have 1 guy with a plasma gun and 1 guy with a melter gun. If you're taking a 10-man squad, you want to have your Sergeant with a Plasma Pistol and a Power Fist. You want to have 2 guys with plasma guns, 2 guys with melter guns, and then you want to have 5 guys with just hotshot rifles. If you do that, you'll end up with a 10-man squad, which is actually packing as much, if not more, firepower, thanks to them having a better native ballistic skill, than a full 20-man blob of guardsmen. And this kind of really hammers home that point I was making earlier. Scions are there to do damage. They're not there to hold ground or provide wound density or screening or anything like that. You're getting a lot of firepower onto a relatively small squad. And if the weapon options weren't enough to illustrate my point, then the Scions ability, Stormtroopers, well, really gives them a big damage boost. Each time a model in this unit makes this attack, you reroll a wound roll of 1. Just inbuilt, reroll 1s to wound. Fantastic. If the target of that attack is an enemy unit within range of an objective marker, you can reroll the wound roll instead. This was a big change. If you used Scions in the index, not the codex, the index, then this used to be reroll 1s to hit or full rerolls to hit. In the codex, they changed it over to wounds. In my opinion, this was a very, very important and very impactful change to Scions. The thing is with Scions is they're a damage dealing unit, but their strength of their weapons really caps out sort of 8 or 9. 8 on all that plasma, 9 on all the melter. That's a bit of an issue when, well, people who watch my channel will know I'm seeing red right now. I'm going back, I'm having Vietnam flashbacks. When you run into 13 Chaos Knights. To fill you in, I went to a GT where I played Chaos Knights, War Dog spam, 3 games in a row, and I just wanted to give up. I did give up actually, but anyway. The point is, is because you've only got strength 9, the moment you, as your higher strength, the moment you come across vehicles or monsters or anything tough, you really struggle to do damage, because fishing for 5s is not reliable. But fishing for 5s for rerolls is actually a very, very reliable method of doing damage. The rerolls are very, very important. So Scions going from getting rerolls to hit wasn't such a big deal because, well, as we've said, they already have a relatively good ballistic skill. And if you're in a detachment like Bridgehead Strike Force, which gives them the turn that they deep strike down +1 to hit, you really don't need to worry about trying to hit the enemy. You're hitting on 2s inbuilt. So what you need to worry about is rerolling, is wounding the enemy. Well, if you've got 4 rerolls to wound, it really solves that big problem with this unit. So Scions, long story short, used to have a bit of a problem with wounding things. Now they don't have that problem. However, I do want to acknowledge something here. I think it's an important point. If you've got used to them doing the reroll to hit thing, especially in terms of like Overwatch, because that used to be really helpful with Overwatch, going to the reroll into wound thing, it feels wrong. It feels wrong. It feels like a nerf, but trust me, it's not. Okay? It feels different. It feels wrong. You have to start trying to manage your expectations in terms of hits. You have to start thinking about in terms of maybe I'm going to go for take aim of a first rank fire, second rank fire. You know, you've got to think about, am I in Bridgehead? Am I going to be in a Taurox? All these kind of things. There's ways of managing the to hit rolls, but getting the wound rolls to reroll was more important and helped Scions do their job better. I'm just speaking to the veterans at this point because I know myself when I first tried it, I was like, ugh, I don't like it. But actually, it ended up being better over the course of the game. We've also got the Voxcaster Wargear ability. This is the same Voxcaster ability you will have seen on pretty much any guard datasheet that can take one, Cadians, Deathcall, that kind of stuff. Allows you to potentially farm CP. Now that covers everything on the Codex datasheet, but there have been a few things that have been added or changed via various FAQs. The first one we want to look at is the Codex FAQ. Now you can find all of these on Warhammer Community and then go to Downloads, Warhammer 40k, and then you'll have this series of like key core rules and key downloads. You'll have like indexes and so on and so forth. You want to go to Codex, FAQs, and Errata. Here you'll find the Guard FAQ, Codex Astra Militarum version 1.1, and you can see here a bunch of stuff has been changed for the Scions. So you can see that they did add the core rule Deep Strike, and you can see that's where they changed the ballistic skill of like plasma pistols, bolt pistols, and stuff like that to 3+. So it's important that you know about these couple of bits, otherwise you might not realize your Scions can Deep Strike, and obviously you might be running around with your Scion Sergeant hitting worse than the rest of the squad for some reason. However, it's in these various FAQ documents that we start to understand why Scions aren't a very popular choice. Because if you've been listening to this video so far, I've been glazing the Scions pretty heavily. I've been saying that they do a lot of damage, they can take a lot of special weapons, they've got good abilities, their abilities have been changed to actually solve some of their fundamental issues, so now they can wound things that are normally tough and out of their league. So why did I say at the very beginning of the video that Scions have fallen so far, and that you basically don't see anyone taking them in their lists anymore? Well, there are a number of reasons, but the first and foremost one is points costs. Scions have been hit with multiple waves of points nerfs, their points being increased time and time again, to the fact now that they're overcosted. They're too expensive. You see, a 5-man squad of Scions at the beginning of the edition used to cost 50 points, and a 10-man squad costs 100 points. We're now at the stage where 5-man squads of Scions cost 70 points, and those big squads cost 140. But don't forget, you do need to add the command squad in there as well, which I believe costs 85 points. So you're actually looking for one of those big squads at a 225 point unit, which is more than most main battle tanks. But you can see the Leman Russes here. That's nearly as much as a Leman Russ commander. That's more than any of the other Leman Russ options that we've got. And the reality is, and if we look through the lens of the big squads first, the reality is that Scions don't deliver enough of a punch for the points investment that is being asked of you. Because remember what I also said towards the beginning of the video when we were looking at the stat line and we were talking about durability. Scions drop down, smash an area, but then they all die. So you get one pop out of them. If you're very lucky, you'll get 1.5 pops out of them. But realistically, you're going to get one drop and then they are going to get dropped. And asking for a 225 point unit that is utterly disposable, that's only going to be able to do one good drop, is too much. And then you factor in, it's not just points, but it's also Scions, to be most effective in that capacity, need to be deep striking down. Well, deep strike can only really be done outside of specific detachments, and believe me, we'll be talking about Bridgehead in a moment, but that can only really be done turns 2 and turn 3. Well, what if the drop turn 2 or turn 3 isn't a good one? You can't hold off. You can't choose to leave them in reserve till turn 4 till turn 5. You can't choose to bring them in turn 1 most of the time. And so what ends up happening, if your opponent knows you've got one of these big blobs of Scions, is they'll screen them out. Because there's lots of line of sight blocking terrain. If you've ever, even on GW boards, but on UKTC, WTC, there's so many places for your opponents to hide. And whether you've got line of sight to them or not, you have to stay 9 inches away as part of deep strike. So what ends up happening is your Scions cost a lot of points, but then more often than you would like, not every game, but more often than you would like, when it really matters, your opponent will effectively screen them out. At that point, you end up deep striking them down somewhere that's not as good, and therefore, or you deep strike them down somewhere completely safe, hoping to basically use them as like an infantry unit later on, and they just lost a huge amount of their value. A huge amount. I recently went to a tournament where I tried putting a lot of stuff in reserve, and it was a GT, and on the first day I doggedly stuck to this idea of I'm just going to put lots in reserve to have these big drops coming down, just to really test it. By day 2, I was starting with everything on the board because I was just so consistently getting frozen out because we're not playing on 6x4 boards anymore. I know this is an old complaint, and all the people who've joined in 10th edition are like, what are you talking about, old man? But we used to play on bigger boards and they got shrunk down. Well, one of the consequences of the boards getting shrunk down is it's much easier to screen for that. We've lost like a foot from the boards and most play, foot on one side, half foot on the other side. We've lost a lot of space. So it's easier to get frozen out. Well, when that happens, your Scions are losing a lot of their mileage. Then you look at a tank. Even something as basic as a Lehman Russ. Whatever variant you want. You look at a tank. Tank costs less. Tank starts on the board. There's nothing stopping you from putting a tank into strategic reserve if you want to. It'll have some restrictions, but it'll get most of the benefits of it. But it's not reliant upon being in reserve. It will happily start on the board, or on occasion when the opportunity presents itself, when it's the right move to make in that game, the tank can do reserve shenanigans as well. But the one thing the tank's doing so much more. The tank is more durable. The tank has got long range firepower, which means it doesn't have to drop into death to achieve its job. It can push up aggressively, or it can hang back and do long range fire support. It's more durable, it's more flexible, and it's bringing arguably more firepower, especially if you go for a variant which is good at anti-tanks, or you're in combined arms when you're getting lethal hits. Vanquishers, Demolishers, arguably Executioners, all of these options have got fantastic firepower, and yet they are significantly cheaper than a Tempest's Scion Blob. That wasn't always the way. Scions used to be 170 points for a 10-man squad with a command squad. And a lot of people complained about that being too cheap, but what they didn't realize is that Scions were at that level competing with other damage dealers in your army. But and those other damage dealers, like tanks, they didn't have as much drop in and smash the entire area potential, but they could do damage consistently over the game. And so that was the trade-off. Do you want to go for a Scion squad that's going to go in and smash and then die? Or for roughly equivalent points, do you want something that will do more damage over a longer period of time in the game and maybe be a bit more durable? Hence why these things were, generally speaking, on a similar level. Now, you've got Scions costing so much more, and players are going to themselves, well, Scions aren't necessarily, as controversial as this may sound, Scions aren't necessarily better than tanks. They do specific jobs better than tanks, but they're both in the same category of damage dealer. That's what I'm trying to get across. I'm probably not explaining myself very well, but hopefully that's coming across. So if we've got two units that are in the same category, I have to decide if this one unit, which is significantly more expensive and can do a couple of unique things, is better than this other unit, which generally speaking is going to be much more consistently performing, but won't be as specialist. Well, the value of that specialism clearly does, what we've seen from guard lists, the value of that specialism does not equal 225 points. It equals probably the original points, about 170 to 180 points. So the points costs have completely killed the big squads. But what about those smaller squads? 70 points is still a good deal, right? No, it's not. Because 70 points to achieve an objective that might not even come up is a bit of a problem. Think about it this way. You spend 70 points on a unit that its one job is to get you behind enemy lines or establish locus or engage north fronts on turn 2 or turn 3. What happens if you don't draw that card? You've got a unit like 5 Scions which just failed in their primary role, and the unit isn't big enough and doesn't come with enough firepower to be able to pivot to another role. Compare this to, as crazy as this sounds, but commissars. Commissars cost 30 points. 40 points cheaper. I can put a commissar into strategic reserve. That commissar, it might not help me get the objective turn 2 deep striking down, but I could hold on to that card and get it turn 3. Maybe that's a good thing to do, maybe that's not. We won't dwell on that right now. But the point is, for 40 points less, I've got a unit that can do the same job. But not only that, is it's flexible. If I look across the board and I'm like, I'm never getting into my opponent's deployment zone, they're just going to screen that out all game, whether they've got 12-inch deep strike deniers or whether they've just got a big horde arm, whatever it is. I'm never going to get in there. Well, with 5-man Scions, you're screwed because you've got a little 5-man pissant squad running around doing nothing. With the Commissar, it's like, well, I didn't spend any points on this, and so I might just put it in shooters of enemy to see what would happen. It's hard to screen out one dude than it is 5. But also, I'll just put him in an infantry blob instead. He can just do his Commissar job now and try and keep the morale a bit higher and help me get a bit more objective control and be a bit less susceptible to battle shock. So again, we've got a unit which is not quite as capable, but capable enough. But more importantly, it's more flexible. This is the problem with Scions right now. Players at all levels, whether it's the small squads for doing secondaries or the big squads for doing damage, players are being asked to pay too many points for a unit which isn't flexible enough. It does some things very well, but it's not flexible enough. And when you're at a tournament, when every game you're playing is going to be different, why wouldn't you go for a unit that is a bit cheaper, a bit less capable, but a lot more flexible? Now that explains why Guard players aren't taking Scions, but it doesn't answer 2 questions. Firstly, why were they nerfed? And secondly, what about that big picture I was talking about at the beginning of the video? Well, let's start off with the first one. Why were Scions nerfed? In Christmas 2024, GW released a free detachment for the Guard. It was called Bridgehead Strike, and it was all about Scions deep striking down and smashing the piss out of people. It turned out that Bridgehead Strike was very, very powerful, because when you have just like 3 squads maximum that can drop down and do this like smashy stuff, you can kind of handle it. When it's an entire army that's built around it, and then you give them +1 to wound, further solving the problem of them being able to wound, not being able to wound really tough things. It basically makes the Scions very, very powerful. And I won't deny this. I'm not going to be a Bridgehead denier. Like, Bridgehead Strike was very powerful. It was probably a bit too powerful. People were just getting dropped and smashed, especially if you were on boards that weren't incredibly dense terrain. Even UKTC, which is arguably quite dense, people were just getting smashed by Bridgehead. And it was winning a lot of events. Like, Bridgehead was strong. I'm not denying that. But Games Workshop, what they did is they massively put up the points of the Scions, whilst at the same time heavily nerfing the Bridgehead attachment, changing it away from +1 to wound, +1 to hit. But Scions didn't really struggle to hit anyway, so whatever. But the point is that they double nerfed it. Now, firstly, this has put a lot of people off Scions, generally speaking, because if something gets double nerfed, there's this sort of taint that surrounds it. We've seen it loads of times before. When GW over nerf things, people just completely shy away from it. They're like, no, I'm not going near it with the bad way. Even if you can make it work, it's just not worth the effort. The other thing is, though, that they nerfed the points. Now, nerfing the detachment makes sense. If the detachment is too powerful, then you nerf the detachment. But by nerfing the points, they've had a huge knock-on effect. There's been a lot of collateral damage. And in my opinion, it has exposed one of the big weaknesses of 10th edition. And really has put at the forefront one of the things that is going to need to be fixed in 11th edition. And this big weakness is that big Scion squads and small squads to doing secondaries were not a problem outside of Bridgehead. Think about it. Guard had been able to take these big mega blobs of Scions and these small objective squads of Scions for like 18 months before Bridgehead came along. And there'd been a nerf here and there, a few subtle tweaking of points, but by and large people were like, yeah, Scions are strong, but they're exactly where they should be. Because there's only one list of points for all of the Guard. There's only one list. No matter what detachment you're taking, this is how much this unit's going to cost. When they up the points of Scions because of it being too powerful in Bridgehead, they basically had the collateral damage of nerfing Scions for every other detachment. Putting a 5-man squad of Scions in your siege detachment, in your recon detachment, in your Hammer the Emperor detachment, it wasn't broken. It just meant that you had spent a proportional amount of points in perhaps achieving a secondary objective like behind enemy lines, so on and so forth. But if it didn't come up, as we said, what if you don't get the cards turn 2 or 3? It wasn't the end of the world. But now, if you want to try that same tactic, it's costing you too many points. And you might be like, oh, well, what's the big difference between 50, 60, and 70 points? It's only like, what, 10, 20 points? Who cares? Fixed points values. Scions going up 20 points wouldn't be such a big deal if in the rest of your army you could just drop a plasma gun here. Drop some melter sponsors down to plasma cannon sponsors, something like that. If we had granular points, if we paid for war gear, then Scions going up in Bridgehead, where you're going to be really focused on Scions, would keep almost the nerf there, but other armies that were taking other units could really improvise, adapt, and overcome. But putting a unit by 20 points can have a huge knock-on effect. It's like, well, okay, you put a unit by 20 points. My list is now 2,020 points. We've all been here. Don't deny it. We've all been here. Whether you've been building a list up or whether you've been having to adjust it post points nerf, how many times has your list been over by 10, 20 points and it's ended up being a ball ache? You have to rewrite half your list because you can't just tweak a few things. You've got like, well, this unit has to come out and I need to put this unit in, but now I'm still 5 points over, so I take this out. But I really wanted that unit because it was all like a finely balanced ecosystem. Putting things up in points has a huge knock-on effect for across the whole codex. But this effect is really compounded when players can only deal in absolutes when it comes to their points, can only remove large chunks or put large chunks of points in, when they can't just drop 5 points here, drop 10 points here, take a 20-man squad of Guardsmen and bring it down to an 18 or 17-man squad. When they can't do that, points increases have a big impact. And I think it's really showing that granular points in some capacity is kind of needed. We've seen this not just with Guard, we've seen it with Marines. I remember Marine players gnashing their teeth in frustration because they were all having to pay obscene points cost for things like for assault intercessors, because Blood Angels were getting huge mileage out of assault intercessors, but regular Marine players weren't. But they were still having to pay. They wanted to put assault intercessors on their list just because it's nice to have a unit like that, or there was some sort of, they were taking them for some sort of cheap combat punch in their list. But now they couldn't do that with that unit anymore because they were paying Blood Angel prices, but they weren't getting Blood Angel effects. Now this is not crazy thing here. This is not me saying we need to go back to the good old days. This is not me being boomer old man Mordian. I think if we're going to continue with these free war gears, we're going to continue with these non-granular points, then my solution would be that there should be a points list for each detachment. So if you're in Bridgehead, your Scions cost 70 points. If you're in Combined Arms, maybe your Scions cost 60 points because you get lethal hits. But if you're not in either of those attachments, your Scions can cost 50 points. Now, that means you create like a full list of points for each attachment. Or another option could simply be like under Scions here, it could say 5 models 70 points, 10 models 140 points, and then under here it could say Bridgehead plus 10 points, something like that. You could have it under the unit entry. It depends if GW if GW is like, well, a Vanquisher's a Vanquisher, so that'll be the same points cost in every army. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Keep that at 145. But if you're going to be nerfing things based on specific detachments, then there should be points costs for that detachment and then points costs for other detachments. That, I think, would be the compromise between adding full-blown granular points, every last little war gear's got its own weapon, and the new system where there's no nuance whatsoever. We've gone from arguably, not my opinion, but arguably too much nuance to too little nuance. Now we need to come to the halfway point, and if we're going to continue with this detachment system, I think having detachment-based points nuance is the way to go. But of course, all of this is just like my opinion, man! Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Do you think that Scions are way overcosted now? Do you think there is a big problem with GW points at the moment? Or do you think they're actually still fine? And that people saying Scions are dead are maybe exaggerating a little bit? Let me know your thoughts. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to smash the like button. And if you want to see more content like this, then subscribe to never miss an episode. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian glory hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and patrons. You guys are amazing, truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full-time without the incredible and generous support of my members, so thank you guys so much. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a heartfelt thank you to Alex Dengal, Bon Vert, Lord Pryor, Mark Panconi, RJ Scorpion, Swordfish Trombone, Try Again Bragg, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Diesel Fox, and August Barney. Seriously guys, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your support is incredible and it makes a huge difference. Thank you so much. That's all for now. Hope you've all enjoyed today's video, and of course, as always, see you guys next time.